Dave Filoni promoted to Executive Creative Director at Lucasfilm a year ago. Today's Thursday, May 20th, 2021. I hadn't checked the Lucasfilm site for about a week, and this morning I noticed a major update to the website. Around 12 lunchtime today, several people on Reddit caught wind of this and, of course, went crazy. And everyone on Twitter started tweeting all over the place about how Dave had been promoted. Naturally, nobody did any research. Good thing for you, you found Not My Star Wars. Let's take a look at a little bit of history. May 17th, 2021, Wayback Machine. This is the homepage of Lucasfilm. This is today, May 20th, 2021. The banner images have changed, but as you can see, the site layout is pretty much the same. Now let's check the Leadership tab, where everyone saw that Dave Filoni was announced as Executive Creative Director. April 29th, 2021, on the Wayback Machine. Lucasfilm.com, who we are, leadership team. The Wayback Machine makes captures of websites periodically. Usually the Wayback Machine will pick up when there is a major update to a website. The last capture was April 29th, 2021, so we don't know exactly when this change occurred, although it does appear to have been early this morning, May 20th. So as you can see here, on April 29th, leadership, Kathleen Kennedy, Lin-Wen Brennan, Momita Sengupta, and then Rob Bredow. If you go all the way down, Dave Filoni is not here. Here is today, and you will see the difference. Leadership, the page is basically the same, Kennedy and Lin-Wen, Momita, and then you have Dave Filoni, Executive Producer / Executive Creative Director. Notice Rob is right here as well. There are a few new executives, but overall the page is the same and nothing that affects creatives. So now let's really look at this as I've done the research. Dave Filoni, Executive Producer / Executive Creative Director. First, these titles are written in a specific way on purpose. This is telling you that his primary title is Executive Producer. He is Executive Producer of various shows for Lucasfilm. His secondary title, secondary responsibility, is Executive Creative Director. Not of the entire company, not of everything Star Wars, but that he is, as a secondary position, Executive Creative Director. So now let's look at this in contrast to what else is going on at Lucasfilm. Here we're back on the leadership page. There are 3 other people that you must take note of. Rob Bredow, Doug Chiang, and John Knoll. So let's begin with Doug Chiang. Doug has been at Lucasfilm much longer than Dave Filoni. Again, titles are written a certain way for a reason. Vice President and Executive Creative Director, Star Wars. So his focus is on the Star Wars franchise, but he is regardless a Vice President, not / and Executive Creative Director at Lucasfilm. Last I checked, a Vice President is higher than an Executive Creative Director. Also note that Dave Filoni is not the only Executive Creative Director, because everyone is getting this confused today and going off about how Dave Filoni is the new creative director. He runs all the creative at Lucasfilm. No, he does not. Doug Chiang, with more tenure, more power, and also has that same title. The difference is that he is both of these equally, not one title / secondly another title. Chiang had been gone from Lucasfilm for 2 years and returned in 2013 to work on The Force Awakens, and currently serves as Lucasfilm's Vice President and Executive Creative Director. Again, not Vice President / secondary, but Vice President and Executive Creative Director. Let's look at John Knoll. John Knoll, Executive Creative Director, Senior Visual Effects Supervisor, ILM. What is John Knoll's primary title? Executive Creative Director. Once again, Dave Filoni is not the sole Executive Creative Director at Lucasfilm. John Knoll and Doug Chiang are as well. And here's a little fun fact for you. Greatly impressed by visits to ILM's newly founded computer graphics department, John took up computer graphics as a hobby, teaming up with his brother who was working on his doctoral thesis in computer vision at the University of Michigan. The Knoll brothers created Photoshop in 1987. Needless to say, that is a huge achievement. Rob Bredow, Senior Vice President, Chief Creative Officer, ILM. Last I checked, Senior Vice President is a higher ranking than Vice President. Rob Bredow runs Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, with a particular focus on the creative strategy for the storied visual effects company. He brings an innovative focus to the role, with a background in technology and hands-on experience both as a visual effects supervisor, technology executive, and production partner. As Senior Vice President, Executive Creative Director, and Head of ILM, Bredow is responsible for the company's overall creative strategy and global operations. So what does all of this mean? What it means that while Dave Filoni was indeed promoted to Executive Creative Director, there is still a hierarchy. Kathleen Kennedy, Lin-Wen Brennan, Momita Sen-Gupta. Then you have Senior Vice President, Chief Creative Officer. You then have Vice President and Executive Creative Director, Doug Chiang. So while Dave Filoni, by all means, has some creative power, don't think that he now has full creative control over Star Wars and things at Lucasfilm. He does not. He shares the title with 3 other people, and in fact, at least 2 of those other people have more power than he does. In particular, Senior Vice President and Chief Creative Officer Rob Bredow. He also has to answer to Momita. We have no idea yet what she's going to do, but she was a recent hire at Lucasfilm, roughly 6 months ago. Lin-Wen Brennan, you hear very little about her, but he does have to answer to her. And also, the website was just updated, and guess who's the president of Lucasfilm? Kathleen Kennedy. And guess who promoted Dave Filoni? Kathleen Kennedy. So while people are celebrating Dave Filoni, they're not using their brains and thinking that that's just a confirmation of Kathleen Kennedy's power and that she's not going anywhere. Now, let's take a further look at this. In reality, Dave was not just promoted. He was promoted a year ago. May 20th, 2021, The Mandalorian executive producer Dave Filoni's new job at Lucasfilm isn't actually new, but fans on Twitter got excited anyway. As you can see here, Katie Sackhoff, who literally worked with him recently, didn't have a clue. She tweeted today congratulating Dave Filoni, yet he had this position a year ago. Last summer, Lucasfilm quietly promoted the executive producer and frequent writer and director of The Mandalorian to executive creative director for the entire studio, a rep confirms with Variety. But the company didn't update its website with Filoni's new title until this week, which is when it began to percolate and then explode across Reddit and Twitter as if the promotion had just happened. Naturally, you have all these screwballs on Twitter jumping up and down. Dave Filoni promoted. Dave Filoni is the best thing that could have happened. And meanwhile, this happened a year ago. You even have here Ming-Na Wen, who just recently worked with him. So happy for you. She tweeted this just today. This promotion is a year old. Second, it's not what you think. He shares that same position with John Knoll, who has much more tenure, Doug Chiang, who also has much more tenure and is a vice president, and then Rob Bredow, who is his boss, the chief creative officer and senior vice president at Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy is still very much there and in power. There is no civil war, as she promoted Dave Filoni. And for those that were celebrating and thinking that Dave Filoni is going to save Star Wars, go watch Clone Wars, Rebels, Resistance, and The Mandalorian. Are they all consistent? Is there any continuity, or do all of those shows contradict themselves? All of that was created by Dave Filoni, who can't keep his story straight and doesn't give a damn about George Lucas or Star Wars or you. And by the way, In December, Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy announced Filoni and Favreau are executive producing several Mandalorian spin-offs for Disney+, including The Book of Boba Fett, which is currently shooting and premiering in December, and Ahsoka starring Rosario Dawson and based on the character Filoni created in the Clone Wars, which he did not create. George Lucas created Ashla and handed her to Filoni to develop for the Clone Wars. A third announced spin-off, Rangers of the New Republic, is not currently in active development. Gina Carano is not coming back to Star Wars. Let's take a little trip back in history. That time, George Lucas asked a guy from Pittsburgh to join him and rule the galaxy. Vanity Fair, November 7, 2019. If Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy wants the insights of Lucas, she just calls him, referring to Dave Filoni. Kennedy has George Lucas on her phone, the creator, the maker of Star Wars, but she doesn't bother to call him, she calls Dave Filoni. That makes a lot of sense. They've known each other for a lifetime. To her, Filoni isn't a vital resource because he's a Lucas encyclopedia, but because he took what he learned from him about myth, filmmaking, and technology and applied them to his own heart. There isn't a thing that we do in the storytelling space that I don't check with Dave. So as you can see, while KK makes her own decisions, everything she checks with Dave, Kennedy said. When Filoni expressed interest in directing live action, Kennedy dispatched him on fact-finding missions on the sets of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi to watch how J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson did it. So as I have reported many times before, Dave Filoni was standing on the set with Rian Johnson, watching and allowing Jake Skywalker to happen. And you think that this is the guy that is going to save Star Wars. If you think that things are a mess now with Star Wars, imagine if Dave truly had creative power over it all. He breaks continuity at every turn, and he was a part of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Do you still think he's going to save Star Wars? So yes, the Lucasfilm website was finally updated a year later. How important was it if they updated him a year later? He does have this position, but he shares it and is under others with that same position. And at the end of the day, this is just a reminder that Kathleen Kennedy isn't going anywhere. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the video. May the Force be with you.
Impressive. Most impressive.